that even Tammy and I looked at each other and we were both misty-eyed, because there is a sense of wonder that David Tennant brings that I think people had been pining for. Doctor Who brings wonder to people, and I think people were yearning for that. It had been missing, and I felt in the Star Beast we got that whimsy and wonder back. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures.
Hello everybody, welcome to the show. My name is James, joined as ever with my good friend Steve, and this episode we are looking at episode 1 of the Doctor Who 60th anniversary special, The Star Beast.
James, I can't even tell you. I'm just going to say it. The magic is back. Russell Davies is back. David Tennant is back. Catherine Tate is back. And as much as I appreciate Jodie Whittaker, she's a darling actress. She's fantastic. The Chris Chibnall Doctor Who era just went off the rails for me. It was too preachy. It was too I don't even want to spend a lot of time talking about what went wrong, other than to say that when my family watched together here, I think it was Sunday morning, because it was Saturday night in the UK, and it came out simultaneously on Disney Plus here. In fact, we were so excited. We got up Sunday morning, we put on Disney Plus, and there it was, like, everybody get the coffee, is the magic back? And I can say it is back.
Okay, well, I'm delighted to hear that, because I wouldn't know. It's as simple as that. I mean, I used to watch Doctor Who back when I was a child, during the Tom Baker, Peter Davidson, a little bit into the Colin Baker years, but that's about it. And a lot of that I watched from behind the sofa because I found it very scary. I'm not afraid to say, but my mum has always been a complete diehard fan.
I've never heard that before.
oh yeah, back in the early 80s.
The garbage can Daleks in the 80s. Yeah, that's
terrifying.
That's terrifying. Yeah, frightening.
Absolutely. But yeah, my mum has always been a diehard fan, and so it was actually quite nice, because I'm actually at my parents' place in the UK right now, and so we sat down and we watched it together last weekend. I don't think we watched it on Saturday night, but I think we watched it on BBC iPlayer like the following day.
What did your parents think? What'd your parents think?
I think my mum was generally pleased with it, but she didn't like the Beast, the Star Beast. She thought she wasn't. Yeah, because there's a kind of bait and switch where there's a sort of cuddly, cutie, sort of E.T. like creature, essentially, sort of crash lands on Earth, and then it turns out that you think is being pursued by sort of evil, sort of alien police state officers, and then it's revealed that it's actually the other way around, and that this little this, what's it called?
The little Furby was Hitler, Space Hitler.
Now to hell with this exhibit C.
My son called it. He said, when little Star Beast Furby, sweet little from Gremlin, I just, E.T., he said, oh, that's going to be evil. Russell Davies is going to flip this. The apparent Gestapo-looking police are going to actually be the good guys, and the little cute little Furby is going to be Space Hitler. And sure enough, that's what happened.
I have to be completely honest, I called it as well. If there's one thing I do know about Doctor Who, is that the writing is supposed to be good, and as soon as the setup is sort of unfolds, I was like, this is way too obvious. Surely it's going to be the other way around, right? Because they take it as cute. I mean, but my mum's issue was at the end, she was like, when the meat reveals itself to be the Star Beast, if you like, it wasn't scary enough, and it wasn't evil enough. It was just still a kind of little furball with fangs and claws, and she was unconvinced by that. What I thought was more interesting, or certainly more worth talking about, was how they essentially sort of folded sort of trans identity rights into the entire. And I talked to my mum about it afterwards, and she was like, and I said, oh yeah, it was kind of a bit obvious that the meat wasn't what it appeared to be, because that's what the whole episode was about. It was about physical appearance and identity being two different things, because obviously Catherine Tate's daughter character is trans. To which my mum went, oh, was she? Oh, I didn't even notice. Like, but it becomes kind of like the theme of the episode, when because obviously Whovians will know all of this, but coming into the episode, the whole point was that Catherine Tate had the doctor's identity transplanted into her and then taken out and taken out again, but on the condition that she forgot completely who he was, and that if she remembered, she would die because it would be too much information for her brain to realize. But then the revelation is that she is able to cope with it because she's had a child, and that they split the information between the two of us. But then there's that thing at the end that but because the child is transgendered, she is neither male nor female. She is non-binary. She says, like, I am not, but I am neither. I am everything. I am neither. I am all, and therefore she is able to sort of inherit the powers and cope with them in a way that neither the Doctor nor whatever Catherine Tate's character was called would be able to on their own. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, that's interesting, because when the episode begins and they make some comment about the character being sort of transgender, I was like, okay, it's the BBC being the BBC, being covering all their bases and being as PC as possible. But then they actually made it a very legitimate part of the plot, and I was like, okay, well, in that case, I suppose you get away with it. It'd be interesting to see where they go with it now and how they continue, because that's obviously going to be a fairly important piece of the puzzle, I imagine, and they might upset people. But I was pleasantly surprised by how they were actually able to legitimize the fact that they had seemingly just tossed a trans character in order to sort of tick boxes. But then you're like, oh, okay, no, actually, it has a meaning that actually satisfies all the sci-fi elements of the plot. That was my big takeaway.
There has been some criticism online about the message and the trans issue and that, and there was one moment, I have no problem with kind of progressive values making their way massaged into the fabric of anything, let alone a Doctor Who episode. But there was a couple points that were a little hit on the nose, like right at the end when the daughter says something, we can just give up our power because we're women, something a male presenting doctor wouldn't understand, comparing him, of course, to the female doctor, Jodie Whittaker, beforehand. And I thought, we recently did a review of the faith-based film, The Shift. It's a Christian evangelical film.
We did.
And one of our critiques of it was that it's a little too on the nose. And there was a couple moments in the 60th anniversary special that were a little too on the nose. It's like, come on. But you know what? I'm prepared to give Russell Davies a pass because of how much I enjoyed this episode. For me and my family, it brought the wonder back to Doctor Who. One of the problems from the Chris Chibnall era was it did get too preachy. I don't want Doctor Who dropping in on the Rosa Parks bus like Quantum Leap and affecting history that way, or the Indian-Pakistani border. It gets too on the nose. I want weird space aliens and the thematic elements of Doctor Who that have always been there, the redemption, the love, the mercy, the compassion is all weaved in. I mean, as a Christian, I've always seen Doctor Who as like the most Jesus-y character out there, but they would never say anything like that. It's so woven into the fabric of just who he is as a non-violent person who travels time and space, righting wrongs, meting out injustice, and that's essentially what he's doing. He loves people, he loves his companions, and that brings me back to another element I loved about this. The Chris Chibnall, Jodie Whittaker version did something that really irritated me, is they insinuated a sexual attraction between the companion and the Doctor, between Jodie Whittaker and one of the companions. And for me, that is anathema. I mean, it has nothing to do with heterosexual, homosexual, gay. It's nothing like that. To me, after so many years of the Doctor and the companions relationship is like a holy relationship. There is love, but there's not love, if you know what I mean. And that's what makes it so special. And I love how they kind of redeemed that and pulled back from that, because at the end, when Catherine Tate wants to go on an adventure with the Doctor and then says to her husband, you don't have a problem with this, me going in a box with the doctor. And then he says, with him, no problem. And I'm like, yes, that is the way the relationship with the doctor and the companion is supposed to be. Russell Davies gets it. It's a special relationship, and you cannot play with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I have certainly always been aware of. I don't know the show enough to have put my hand on my heart and said that it had never come up before, but I'm not surprised to hear that it had never come up before, and I'm quite pleased that it's never come up before. Because, I think if you're going to be completely merciless about it, you have to say that, particularly with some of the early Doctors, it was an old man like Will Hartnell doing the thing, and so it's like, you need a sexy young girl in a miniskirt next to him to bring in the audience, for the sake of ratings.
Sure.
But
things haven't changed. Thing hasn't changed. We had Rose, we had Clara, we had Amy Pond, all very attractive women.
I mean, what will be very interesting is how they play with that dynamic going forward, because obviously you've got the new incoming guy, who I think is great, but I can't remember his name. But he's an openly gay actor, and I assume that will play a part, whether spoken or unspoken, in his interpretation of the Doctor. And so if he has, whether his companion is going to therefore be male or female, or how that's going to work and how that dynamic is going to work, will be interesting to see how that plays out. If my understanding is correct, the idea is that this trilogy of episodes is going to culminate with his official unveiling, right?
Yes, it's going to be three with David Tennant, and then the new Doctor will be unveiled. I have to admit, I'm open to any Doctor. I even love Jodie Whittaker. I mean, like I've said, I don't want to besmirch her. I actually love her as an actress, and I think she made a great Doctor. I just had problems with the story arcs and the storylines and the themes that were part of that era. I'm a David Tennant. That is my Doctor. Everybody has their Doctor. David Tennant is my Doctor. And there was a great moment where, obviously when he runs back into the TARDIS, and the TARDIS always remakes itself with a new Doctor. And when you see the new command center of the TARDIS with all the ramps and all the circular, and David Tennant brings such a whimsy to the character. There's such a Wonka in the Chocolate Factory element here.
Oh, this is amazing! It changed! Oh, you clever thing! Look at that!
Even Tammy and I looked at each other, and we were both misty-eyed, because there is a sense of wonder that David Tennant brings that I think people had been pining for. Doctor Who brings wonder to people, and I think people were yearning for that. It had been missing, and I felt in the Star Beast we got that whimsy and wonder back.
That's funny you mentioned that, because I've literally just watched Wonka, the new Willy Wonka movie, this morning. And
wait, how did you get that? We'll talk about that later, but yeah.
So I actually watched the new Willy Wonka this morning, and it does, it's very much about that kind of sort of sense of innocent wonder and magic and all the rest of it, which I agree David Tennant certainly does bring to the character, which I don't think I have seen. But I don't think I ever saw. I think I maybe saw one Matt Smith episode. I don't think I watched any Jodie Whittaker. I don't think I watched any Peter Capaldi episodes. I don't think I saw any of that stuff. You're killing me.
You're killing me, James. You're absolutely killing me. I love Peter Capaldi. I love Matt Smith. Christopher Eccleston. Absolutely.
Didn't watch any of his either.
John Hurt, the War Doctor. Yes.
When was John Hurt the Doctor?
The 50th anniversary special, 10 years ago. He played the War Doctor before he passed away, sadly.
I think I do remember that, actually. Yeah. Nkuti Katwa is the name of the new actor.
Yes, you're right.
Who is Rwandan, and he is openly. I don't want to upset people. He's openly queer, not necessarily gay. He said he doesn't really like to label himself, but he's somewhere in the LGBTQIA spectrum, and so good for him, because his show Sex Education that he does with Asa Butterfield on Netflix is brilliant. He's great.
Yeah. I have no issues with any of that. I just don't want it to be the front and center. I don't want Doctor Who to become a platform for an agenda of some kind of, social awareness. To me, Doctor Who is such a special brand of particularly the British people specifically, but the world at large. I don't want the equivalent of the Sound of Freedom, the Shift, basically what the right does with their religiosity. I don't want the left doing with theirs. I'm kind of a center guy, James. I just want a good story filled with wonder and joy.
What I will say to that is good luck, because I'm not convinced that they won't. Purely, I mean, even watching this episode, this one episode, and I think it's just sort of become so ingrained in the BBC's. I don't even want to call it agenda, but it's more like their mission statement, if you like, is to advance as much representation on screen as possible. Just because I think that's where England is at right now. And certainly what audiences expect from the BBC. So I don't think it's even specifically about Doctor Who. I think it's just what the BBC it has in the plans, and that is very much part of what they are pushing for, just to see so many different demographics represented without it being a story point, just on screen as possible. And so I think that the casting of Jodie Whittaker was very much in keeping with that, because that was such a huge shift away from straight white men, and then it upset so many people. I was so disappointed when I saw how much it upset so many people, because wow, she's a girl, and that was their only argument, and I was like, grow up. So I'm kind of disappointed that you say that you didn't really like how those seasons were written, and I didn't watch any of them, so I don't know, but I was kind of disappointed that she doesn't seem to have been particularly well received, and that she didn't do it for very long, and it didn't run.
No, and it's too bad, because I think in some ways it reflects on her, even though I don't think it should reflect on her.
No,
I thought she did.
she's great.
She did a brilliant job. Yeah, absolutely. And I have every hope. I go into every new Doctor with optimism. Like, I have no negative preconceived ideas. I have enjoyed every Doctor, but I will say the Jodie Whittaker era was the least interesting I'd ever experienced. In fact, my son fell off watching it. My wife's a woman. I mean, you think she'd champion the female Doctor, and it was like, oh yeah. But when we watched this, the family was the Starbies. The family was enamored. Like, the magic is back.
Well, I'm glad though that the BBC have kind of doubled down, if you like. They're like, you didn't like a girl, well, you'll hate this guy then. In that regard, rather than, I mean, in a way, I'm slightly disappointed that they brought back David Tennant, even though it's just for a holiday special, because it does seem to be like a sort of a really safe bet. Why not introduce the new guy for the whole Christmas special?
I think I could tell you why, because BBC may have a mission, but they also have a brand that makes a lot of money, and David Tennant is the safe David Tennant. I mean, is there a more recognizable brand in the UK than Doctor Who? Yeah, I mean, there are some, but not many.
I know what you mean.
I remember in the 2012 opening ceremony of the Olympics in London, at one point they had the sound of Doctor Who's TARDIS arriving. I remember hearing it and thinking, people know that sound. This is part of the British zeitgeist for 60 years. And David Tennant is arguably, of the new series of the last 15, 20 years, the most popular Doctor.
Oh, without a doubt.
And they knew that after Jodie Whittaker, they had the right to ship. They had to write it. As much as we want to say we live in a world where we can go from a woman Doctor to a black Doctor, and it should be seamless, people still have a institutional memory of what the Doctor looks like and responds like. And it's been a white male for the better part of 60 years. And so to change that dynamic too often and too sudden, I mean, you can cry racism and all these misogyny in this, but I think people also have an idea of what a particular character is like. And so if they suddenly had a female James Bond, I'm not saying that we should hate the female James Bond, but after 50, 60 years of Timothy Dalton, Sean Connery, Roger Moore, and Daniel Craig, you have a certain image in your mind of what James Bond is, and a huge departure from that. Some people are not going to go with you. They're just not.
Sure. I thought we might end up talking about James Bond because of this. The difference the difference is James Bond is James Bond. James Bond is one character, you know.
Yeah.
The whole point of the Doctor is that he regenerates.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And he's not human either, right? So correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but I'm pretty sure. So he's not human. He's a Time Lord from Gallifrey.
From Gallifrey.
See? I do know a few
Points
things.
to you, James. Points to you.
And he regenerates. He literally just switches body. So there is nothing tying him to a straight white male body.
No. The dynamics and the mechanics, you are absolutely right. I'm talking about the way an audience perceives the character that's endeared to them.
Right. And I think that what the BBC is reflecting these days is that the what audiences want is different, or what they perceive to be what audiences want is different.
And that's what I was going to say do audiences really want different? Because
you have to remember that the BBC is publicly funded. Right?
Sure.
So it's not run by the government, but it's run in coordination with the government.
No, and there's a certain element. I mean, in theory, I agree with you, and I'm not saying that the casting choices they made are wrong in any stretch. I'm just saying you are taking a bit of a gamble. You don't know. You may assume this is what audiences want, but you can't know that. And so hey, I wish Nkuti Gatwa. I do wish him the best as the Doctor. Like, I'm looking forward to his episodes. I hope that what I love about Russell Davies is he brings this element of the macabre that had been missing. There's just the slight bit of macabre in Russell Davies' episodes of Doctor Who in times past, which I love. And if he can bring all that little wonder and magic that I know that he can do, and if he wants to have a bit of his message, I have no problem with that. Just write good stories. That's all I want is good stories. And if you want kind of to send a progressive message, just don't hit people on the nose with it. Make it a little more subtle. Make it woven naturally. As you said in Star Beast, it just weaves itself naturally. A couple moments I thought it was a little too on the nose, but by and large, I loved this episode.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. I enjoyed it. I don't think it's going to have me rushing to see the other episodes.
Well, when's the pearls?
The second episode is, but if they're going to be on Disney Plus, then I may circle back to them when I get home. I'm still on the road. I'm going to Denmark tomorrow, so I won't be sitting in front of a TV on Saturday night with my mum to watch it. So but then I'll be back in Hong Kong in time for the third one. So who knows? Maybe I will catch them up and we can talk more about these when I'm back home. But I will say that I watched it and I was like, yeah, that's pretty much what I thought Doctor Who is, and I can take it or leave it.
Oh, I love it. I love Doctor Who. More Doctor Who, more Russell Davies, more David Tennant, more Catherine Tate. Loved it. Fantastic. I'm looking forward to the next 2 episodes. But that's what James and I think about the latest installment of the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. But what do you think? Obviously, there's some polarizing views on this. If you go on the internet, on YouTube, a lot of people have some issues with some of the progressive elements that they suspect are there. But as James and I stated, we don't have a big problem with it. But what do you think, James?
Yeah, I think you said it best, Steve. Just tell good stories. And as long as Doctor Who has been famous for telling good stories for like 60 years now, as long as they keep telling good stories, which is, as we were saying when we were talking about the shift earlier, the problem with that is it didn't tell a good story. It didn't engage. Yeah. It didn't engage the wider audience. With Doctor Who, keep telling good stories and everybody will be happy.
Till next episode.
Bye-bye.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be. Your